All right, looks like we're just at 10 o'clock Pacific time. So I will get us up and running. Thank you so much for joining me here today. My name is Carrie Jorgenson, and I'm a college counselor, excuse me, here at ESM Prep. I'm here today to talk to you guys about the University of California, their admissions practices, and then how to tackle the UC application. So just a little bit of background on me before I dig into the slides. Prior to joining ESM about four admission cycles ago, I actually had the opportunity to work on the admissions team for UC Berkeley. I got to read about 1,000 applications that cycle and learned a ton, but very quickly realized I actually loved the other side of the desk and working more closely with students and families on college advising. And then at the very beginning of my career in college counseling in 2013, I also had the opportunity to work for UC Santa Cruz. So it was really personally fulfilling to get to see kind of admission practices from two premier California public institutions and get that experience under my belt. So I'm here to share a little bit of insight from my tenure doing that, and then really dive into the application and how to make the most of presenting yourself as authentically as possible throughout the application. So thank you again for joining me, and I will get right to it. So I wanted to start out with the good news, which is that in a newsletter released by the University of California just yesterday, they actually said that according to preliminary data, the UC offered admission to 2 out of every 3 applicants overall, with nearly 167,000 students offered a spot at one of the university's 9 undergraduate campuses. So I think there's definitely been some discourse in our very competitive landscape that UCs are off limits and just so difficult to get into. And don't get me wrong, they are challenging, but hopefully this data does show you that if your child qualifies academically and wants a spot at the University of California, about 2/3 of applicants are finding a spot at one of the 9 undergraduate campuses. So in terms of kind of what I'd like to share. First, I'll have a couple of different pictures of the universities. I think their architecture is so unique, so different, campus to campus. So figured I would share that. This is UC Berkeley, the very first UC. Fun fact for you, it was actually first founded and operated out of Oakland back in 1868 and moved to Berkeley and the current existing campus in 1873. So just an overview of the University of California. It's one of the largest university systems in the world, offering undergraduate and graduate programs on campuses located up and down the state. Our most northern campus is UC Davis, and then all the way down to UC San Diego. Many of the campuses do offer graduate studies. Oftentimes students are like, wait, what about UC San Francisco? Well, UC San Francisco only offers graduate programs they have a medical center. And so high school kids cannot apply to UC San Francisco. All the other UCs they are able to apply to, UC Hastings College of Law. But for the sake of today's presentation, we'll be focusing on the 9 campuses, UC Davis, Irvine, LA, San Diego, Berkeley, Santa Cruz, Merced, Santa Barbara, and Riverside. I think I got all of them, but you can see here behind me that there's a wide variety of campuses that are considered UCs that high school students are eligible to apply to. So in terms of timeline, we are in August of 2024 right now, and the application actually already opened. So good news, your student can go ahead, create their account. I'll walk through the specifics of that and start tackling just the data entry and getting as much information filled out. So it opened on August, and then applicants can submit it between October 1st and November 30th. That's kind of the filing window that you're allowed to submit it. There's not a huge, we don't tell the students this, there's not really an advantage to submitting it on October 1st. how it works is you submit your application and then it sits there until the readers are ready to review it. So we certainly always try to have students submit by like November 15th at the latest. I've had issues in the past where students have been Thanksgiving dinner, unfortunately, gets interrupted and they have to work on their UC applications to get it in on time. So we want to avoid that at all costs. And then the other kind of just cautionary tale is sometimes the system gets so inundated with applications towards the end of the submission window that the system actually crashes, and that tends to happen just about every year. So in your mind, I would shoot for that November 15th timeframe. Sooner, great, but you also want to make sure that you're taking the time to submit the most quality application possible. Decisions roll out as early as February 1st, but most campuses really aren't notifying applicants until March. So just thinking bigger picture in terms of what that means, if a student is applying early decision to a campus, that means they're applying usually November 1st, and then they'll find out that decision by mid-December to late December. And so if they apply early decision and they also apply to UC schools, you actually won't be able to find out the outcome of your UC applications, assuming that you're accepted to your early decision school. And so at that point, we would counsel the students to let the UC know, hey, thank you so much. I actually need to rescind my application because I'm not even eligible to go because I was accepted to my early decision school. So the timeline is just a little bit, something to keep in mind as you're mapping out the strategy on how to apply to each of your schools. Waitlist offers, so some students do receive an offer to be placed on a waitlist at one or more of the campuses. If a waitlist offer is extended, applicants need to respond to the university by the stated deadline. And really, UC campuses, as with all college applications and anything related to it, they do not have any leniency on if you miss a deadline. It is not like, hey, teacher, I forgot my homework at home. Can I turn it in a day late? Like they really have no mercy when it comes to that. So being really on top of like the fine print is a very important part of this process for students. And then I just wanted to touch on something called guaranteed admission. So guaranteed admission is if an applicant is identified as being in the top 9% statewide or the top 9% local context, it's called ELC, eligibility in the local context. Those applicants are notified in mid-April that they will be offered a spot on a UC campus if they haven't already been. And so it basically is a guarantee that your student will be placed on a UC campus if they get that ELC designation. Your high school will inform you of that in the fall of the senior year if a student is kind of identified as ELC. And then what that means is that by mid-April, a spot will be offered if it hasn't already. Truthfully, when a student gets an ELC designation, it usually works itself out where they're accepted to a UC campus and there's no need to kind of like go through this process to like guarantee the admission, but it's just peace of mind that there is a process behind that ELC designation. And then May 1st is the statement of intent to register is due. It's a deposit, it's $250. And all colleges nationwide require, that's kind of like national decision day, that you let your colleges know that this is in fact where you want to attend. So a couple of things to kind of prepare for the application now. It is definitely time to start. We do not want our students waiting until October or November. It's a lengthy application, and it's an application where a lot goes into it to submit a really authentic quality application. So now would be a great time for students to be researching the campuses. We recommend that students apply broadly. It is, a cost, obviously, but it is one application with check boxes. And so it doesn't really hurt or impact a student, aside from the financial barrier, of course, and there are fee waivers for families that cannot afford the cost of the application. But apply widely so that you have the best chance of hopefully getting into at least one and having that, if you're a California resident, in-state tuition option. Some majors have different names across the system and might be located in different departments. So it's kind of starting your research now, like political science is called, political science on one campus, but maybe it's called global affairs or international relations, or, there's a lot of different ways that colleges identify things. So just starting to kind of figure out those details sooner than later is advisable at this juncture. And then gathering materials. So having your transcript and your academic records. The UC is a system where you are self-reporting everything. I'll get into that more in a little bit. You'll need your list of current and planned courses, awards and honors you might have received that are academic in nature or otherwise, volunteer programs, hours committed to those programs, employment timeline, etc. Lots of times students who are also applying to colleges that are housed on the Common application, which houses about 1,000 colleges and counting, they've already gathered a lot of this material. So if your student has already started to work on any form of college apps, chances are they have a lot of this together, but just important to be aware of what goes into it. And then last but certainly not least is the PIQs, or personal insight questions. It's the most central part of the application. It's the student's voice and heartbeat, and starting to think about those prompts and how to authentically present yourself is really important at this juncture. Here is a picture of UC Merced, the youngest of the UC campuses. And let's see. So just kind of a little bit about requirements to be eligible to apply to the UCs. So there's kind of a combination of what's called A to G subject requirements and then GPA. So for freshman admission, you have to meet the subject and GPA requirements and complete a specific pattern of college prep coursework known as A to G. So I don't expect you to memorize this. The good news is that every high school in California is set up to make sure that colleges or that applicants meet these minimum criteria. And so graduation requirements essentially align with UC requirements. Area A is history and social science. 2 years of that is required. Area B is English. 4 years of that is required. Area C is math. 3 years of that is required. Area D is science. 2 years of that is required. Area E is language other than English. 2 years of that is required. Area F is visual and performing arts. 1 year of that is required. And Area G is a designated college prep elective, and 1 year of that is required. So the thing I want to stress, though, this is the minimum number of courses added. To be competitive at the UC, most of my students are doing, for instance, rather than just 2 years of a language, they're probably doing 4, 3 minimum, 4 really to kind of nudge the application up in terms of competitiveness. Most applicants really are doing additional coursework beyond that. In fact, that's one of the criteria that the UC looks at, coursework beyond the minimum requirement. And of course, you want to put yourself, in the best possible position to be the most competitive for acceptance. You can access, this is a little bit in the weeds, but you can access your school's what's called articulation agreement. So if you're curious which courses at your high school qualify for the A to G, you can look up your high school name, Google high school name, articulation, UC articulation, and it should take you to a website where you can search the high school and pull up the actual A to G course list. So that's just kind of a tidbit for students as they're filling out the application, but also if you're curious. And then there is a minimum GPA requirement in the A to G courses, and that's a 3.0 or higher if you're in California, and a 3.4 or higher if you're not a resident of California. And just so you know, the GPA is calculated using the summer after 9th grade through the summer after 11th grade. So it's any coursework completed in A to G from summer after 9th grade to summer after 11th grade. Now, the other thing I'll note just regarding academics is that the UC does not consider SAT or ACT test scores anymore. The entire university system is now what's called test blind. So they do not look at those test scores. It's not part of the review. So campuses use multiple factors when selecting students. The way in which campuses select students really varies, and it is to the student's advantage to include as much information as possible on the application. The thing I always remind my students of is that you are the only voice in the UC application. Unlike Common Application, for instance, schools that are housed on the Common App, I'll use, I'm in the Bay Area near San Francisco, so I'll use kind of my local school, Stanford. They're on the Common App. Stanford takes teacher letters of rec and counselor letters of rec. So they're hearing from minimally 2 to 3 other voices in the application in addition to the student. The UC does not have the bandwidth, to be quite frank, to read letters of recommendation. When I read, I was on the clock and did not have time to kind of absorb any more information than what is presented in the application. So it behooves the applicant to fill out the entire application as thoughtfully as possible, leverage every ounce of real estate, because they are the only voice in the application. There's no outside perspective on who the student is. And so it's up to the student to brag in the most thoughtful and humble way. Students really should feel free to discuss their roles and responsibilities at work or in community service, share their stories in their PIQ responses, and talk about their educational journey. This is because every student, you've probably heard this before when you've heard of the term holistic review, is truly considered in the context of their own environment, which includes school, family, geographic region. They're also considered within the context of the applicant pool for each campus. So just a quick note regarding PIQs, because you can see here that PIQs are a pretty big chunk of the puzzle, right along with, extracurriculars, academic factors, the context. And that's something students have a lot of control over. And so with the PIQs, I just had the opportunity to listen to somebody from UC Santa Cruz, an admission officer, speak, and he shared like some really great advice, which I totally agree with from my time working at the UCs. You want the PIQs to be very conversational. So that first sentence of the first PIQ, you have to write 4 of them, really needs to be a thesis sentence, and the reader should have an understanding of everything they're going to learn about you through that first sentence or 2. You really want to write it as if you had the opportunity to have an admission officer sitting directly across from you. It would be weird if you had an admission officer sitting directly across from you and all of a sudden you started quoting some famous person from Shakespeare, or quoting Shakespeare, for instance. You would not do that conversationally. So instead of kind of being flowery as students kind of tend to want to be when it comes to narrative style writing, just be direct and treat it as if you are literally sitting across from somebody and you want to tell them some important, compelling detail about your life. You also want every sentence of each PIQ to reveal new and compelling information. And so keep that in mind as you're reading through these PIQs and helping your student figure out what is the best way to kind of tackle their voice and authentically giving a snapshot of who they are. The other thing I want to make sure that I remark on is that UCs I was never aware of which campus students applied to aside from Berkeley or aside from UC Santa Cruz. So you're checking a box, but your application is reviewed completely independently of the other campuses. So for instance, UC Santa Cruz will not call UCLA and ask if they've admitted a certain student. Each campus selects completely independently. And here is UC San Diego. Fun building they have on campus. Okay, so in terms of the application, your applicant can go to apply.universityofcalifornia.edu. They'll pick this is a slide from last year. So this year we'll say fall quarter / semester 2024. Application level is freshman. You're currently in high school, hoping to become a freshman at the University of California. So pretty straightforward. This is a nice picture of UC Santa Barbara. Can't miss those palm trees. And once you're in and have created your application, here is kind of the navigation. So it's a pretty straightforward application. You can see that there's different sections. I always ask that students start by completely filling out the About You section because it contains kind of triggers for the other sections of the application. And so that's the only part that I want a student to fully fill out, and then they can bounce around and start filling out the other sections. So start with about you. This is an expanded section of about you, and you can see that there's a check mark next to each individual section that you get once every required question is answered. My students hear from me all the time. If there is a question that is not required, you still need to fill that out. Optional in this world means do it, because it's your job to paint the most thoughtful picture of yourself and give as much data as possible. UC Irvine, again, nice palm trees. Okay, so campuses and majors, that's one of the sections of the application. The college view is the default view, but students can also see majors grouped within colleges. So this is UC Santa Barbara, and this is how your applicant would go in to actually select which major. Now, just a quick note here, students can select both a major and an alternate major if it's available. Alternate majors aren't available on every campus, but most campuses do offer them. And if an alternate major is offered, you absolutely want to have your student select that. If a campus is unable to offer the applicant a place in their first choice major, then they might consider them for an alternate major. And be sure that the alternate major is in a subject area that the student really wants to study in the event that they're actually selected for that. And in some cases, depends on kind of the strategy and specifics. This is really getting into the weeds and a great question for a counselor. But sometimes the alternate major should be in a different area of study. So, for instance, sometimes I'll have a student do engineering, one of the most competitive majors across the UC, if not the most competitive for their major. And then for an alternate major, if the student is open to it, I'll often have them do math or physics, which depending on the college can be housed in the College of Letters and Sciences, which generally speaking, majors in College of Letters and Sciences versus an engineering college are going to be slightly easier to get into. Asterisk, slightly easier. There's always a lot of data to drill down on. UCs don't really readily show the breakdown of major admission rates. There's a little bit out there if you dig, but it is something to kind of keep an eye on as you're strategically picking what majors and alternate majors really make the most sense. So let's see here. If a student is applying to UC San Diego, they're the only campus that does this, but you also, in addition to selecting the majors and alternate majors at UC San Diego, you have to actually rank order which colleges you would want to live in. So UC San Diego offers these living learning communities. They're fantastic, but it is really important that the student actually think through this, because in the event that they're accepted to UC San Diego and eventually enroll, the college will do their best to slot them into their first, second, or third choice, likely, college. And so what that means that, say you picked Earl Warren as number one, you're accepted, and there is a space for you in Earl Warren. That means that when you start out as a freshman, you're taking classes with all other students who also selected Earl Warren, and you're also living together. So there's a set group of core classes that you and Earl Warren College students take, and you live together. So they all have their own feel and vibe. It's definitely worth taking the time to review. When you're in the application, there's a link that kind of takes you to a page that gives you more insight. But, for a really STEM focused kid, you might not want to pick one that's more humanities based or vice versa. So doing your homework on this is important if a applicant is applying to UCs. And just so you know, or UC San Diego, and just so you know, San Diego does not see, like, there's no bearing on admission. There's no strategy to be had here. It's simply pick what interests you. And here is UC Riverside. Nice little picture there. Great looking quad. Okay, so 7th and 8th grade. Probably didn't think that this would come up, but 7th and 8th grade courses, they don't need to appear on the high school transcript, but sometimes you will want to report those on your application. So for instance, if a student started out in geometry or algebra 2 in 9th grade, they would want to make sure that they report in 7th or 8th grade that they took Algebra 1 or geometry, just so that the UC has a sense that those classes have been completed. And then the same goes with language. So say a student started out in Spanish 2 in their freshman year, they would want to make sure that they report Spanish 1 from 7th or 8th grade. So that's just a section of the application to be aware of. You will want to put your high school attended. Every high school attended from the beginning of 9th grade all the way through high school. So if your student happened to transfer, both high schools go into this section. You can search by the school's name, city, or what's called a CEEB code. And just about every high school's in there. It's pretty rare if a student can't find their high school. Okay, so high schools attended, you'd be entering the dates of attendance. So this particular class started in 2021, typically August or September, and then end date would be May or June, typically of 2025. You're letting the UC system know a little bit more about the curriculum that's offered at your school, and the grading terms that are used by your particular school. So high school coursework, this is probably the most important part of the application, aside from the PIQs and the activities list. So this is where a student needs to have their transcript, and courses are entered by grade level beginning in 9th grade. So first you're selecting the subject area. So is this an A, history or social science, and the category. And then a student is, if they're enrolled in the California high school, their entire high school course list should auto-populate, and then they're just checking off the boxes and putting in the grades. And then you will put in your 12th grade grades. You put those in as in progress for the fall semester if you're on a semester system, and then planned for the spring. So just so you're aware of that. And if students don't see their courses, they can be entered in manually, but if you're at a, like I said, if you're at a California public school or California private school, your courses should auto load. And if not, then you will be manually entering those in. So there's a lot of specifics that come with this. It's a little bit in the weeds, but this would be a great thing to either work with your ESM counselor on, or B, make sure that you, once you've entered in all the coursework, to go to your high school counselor and have them double check it. Because you don't want to mess this part up. You want when an application is received, they are not processing the transcript. They're only actually looking at the self-reported coursework that's put into the application. Transcripts are sent eventually to the UC system and are of course rectified to make sure that everything in the application matches up with what's actually on the transcript. So you want to give the most accurate picture of where you are academically, and you do that by having your transcript and then double checking with your counselor at school to make sure that you've designated everything into the right A to G category with the right grades and the right honors designations. Okay, if a student has taken a college course in high school, you'll definitely want to report that and add the college information after you've put in the high school information. And this includes any courses completed through a dual enrollment or middle college program, which is applicable to some high schools. It's really a similar process to entering the high school information. Okay, so if courses were taken at a California community college, a UC transferable course list will appear, which is really nice. You can select the course taken, the grade earned, and then the A to G subject area where it fits. So that's just a little tidbit for applicants. And then let's see, academic history. Okay, so this is an important area that definitely needs to be leveraged. I can't tell you how many times I would read a file and wish that I knew more. So additional academic comments can be used really, it's up to the student with how much they want to share, but you can see here there's 550 characters that a student can elaborate on, basically explaining something. So, maybe when previous year's applicants were impacted a lot by COVID. So sometimes students would say like one line about how their high school maybe changed the grading system for one semester or something like that. Current seniors weren't as impacted in terms of their high school curriculum. But if there's like, I have an athlete right now who had a horrible concussion that truly impacted their sophomore year spring grades. And so this would be a great place. You're not telling a sob story. You're genuinely just saying, hey, look, I had some medical issues during this time. That's context. That is helpful information for the admission folks to understand. And this is, again, no other voices in the application. So it's up to you as the applicant to be as thorough as possible. Sometimes when I worked in high schools, it would be possible where a student wanted to take 4 APs, but the high school wouldn't let them. They're capped at 3 per year. Writing something along those lines just to provide that additional context is helpful. You're trained when you read these files to understand the ins and outs of a high school and their curriculum, but it's just helpful. Like, why not put one extra emphasis on that little tidbit? Or maybe a student tried to take a certain class, but it didn't line up because they also had, Latin 4, which was only offered during 4th period, the same time that AP Environmental Science would be offered. That is worth noting. Like, if the intention was there to take the class, but they couldn't, it should be noted. UCLA, go Bruins. Okay, the next part of the application that is super important is the activities and awards sections. Applicants have 6 different categories that they can choose from in terms of how they want to put these things in. So my best advice is open up a Google Doc, get everything on that Google Doc, and then copy and paste it in. Because unlike the Common App, there's no arrows to move things up and down. So you want to think methodically about the order in which you write your activities list, if you will. I like to have students where, say you are really into robotics, that's your #1 activity, but you've also earned a couple of awards related to robotics. I would probably do your robotics team and then the award related to your robotics team, and then move on to your volleyball that you play and any awards you've earned for volleyball. So it's really clear how deep you've gone and into a certain activity, and it tees it up very nicely for the reader when you do that. You can write up to 350 characters per activity, which is a lot of real estate. On the Common App, you can only write 150 characters. So they want to hear from you. And this is really kind of makes up for not having a voice from the high school in the application. So definitely do not use any abbreviations, spell things out. If the name of a club is the ABC Club, tell the admission officers, what does ABC stand for? We have no idea. Make sure that you are being intentional about your order. Make sure that you don't list the same activity in multiple areas. For instance, listing Honor Society in the awards and honor section, and then also putting it as an extracurricular activity is a no-no. And if an applicant doesn't have the time or opportunity to participate in school or community activities or volunteer or paid employment, explain that to the college. You can say something like family responsibilities. Both of my parents work full-time. It is my role as the oldest sibling to be home with my siblings, get dinner started, help with homework for them. So unfortunately, I was not able to be on that, club basketball team. We understand. That makes total sense. But how else would they know if you're not providing that context? I think you want to make sure, there's 20 spots. Rarely would I actually see a student get to 20. You don't need to overdo it. I'd say, if you can land in like anywhere from 10 to 15, the number honestly doesn't matter as long as it's really thoughtfully done and paints the whole picture of how you have spent your time from freshman year all the way through present, and really kind of give a full picture of your life beyond just sitting in the classroom. So this is just a little bit more specifically what it looks like. So you'll be able to describe the program, you're checking off when you participated, and you're actually providing a snapshot of hours per week and weeks per year. And that really just helps kind of paint a picture of your role, responsibilities, and accomplishments in the activity, rather than focusing on just describing the activity itself. You want to make sure that you're explaining what the activity is, but more importantly, what's your role, your responsibilities, and your accomplishments. And a good activity description also includes numbers. So maybe you are vice president of the newspaper club and you've grown membership from 10 members to now there's 22. Like, that's a meaningful increase and something that provides context. So being as specific as possible is really helpful. Also, feel free to include links. Back when I read in the 2019-2020 cycle, I was not able to actually click on links, but I could copy those links and then open up a web page and check out whatever it is that the student wanted to include. And you bet, like, it gets to be monotonous reading file after file after file. And occasionally, like, there would be something that sounded really cool that I wanted to know more about, and I would absolutely copy and paste that link to look. So, keep in mind that that's something that you can do. I would say we're also trained to not look beyond what's in the application. So there's some admission offices that might not let readers kind of click on those links. But from the side of the desk that I'm on now, I say, why not? Like, put the link in front of them just so that if the curiosity is there, go for it. Okay, quick note on scholarships. This is a really easy section for students to fill out. Even if your family is not applying for financial aid, have the applicant just go through and check off what applies to them, because it's a really easy way to get potentially free money, and a necessary part of the application. All right, on to the PIQs. So they really should be used to personal insight questions, share accomplishments, experiences, talents, decision-making, problem-solving, and contextual information. Individuals from around the world were impacted by COVID. Now we're going on almost 5 years removed. So I personally would not have a student talk about COVID unless it's something that's like very impactful to, their trajectory. I also would make sure that you use kind of the additional information comments to share unusual, rare, or exceptional information. PIQs are really meant to help admission readers hear the students in their own words, pretend as if they're having that conversation across the dining room table, and learn about the students' achievements, perspectives, and environment that cannot otherwise be glistened from the application. And so there's 8 total PIQ questions. The students can answer 4 of those at 350 words per response, and all questions have equal value. And that is absolutely true. There's no like, oh, if you answer this one, it'll totally help with, getting into this school. That's not the case at all. Answer what is going to help you shine the most. How I personally like to do it is I help applicants think of their 4 topics, and then we plug them into the questions. So 4 things about yourself that you would want to share that show off who you are, what your values are, and how you would like to kind of present yourself authentically. If a student's already written a personal statement, which is the 650-word longer essay that goes to most of the other schools on a student's list aside from UC, so those Common App schools, you can absolutely take that personal statement and shorten it and adapt it. Personal statements tend to be a little bit more flowery in nature because you have more real estate. Remember, UC PIQs need to be really direct, really to the point. You should have an idea of what that student is going to tell you after that first sentence or 2. There's tons of guidance online too about the PIQs. So just go ahead and visit the UC website, universityofcalifornia.edu, admission.universityofcalifornia.edu, and you'll find a plethora of information. So this is kind of what the PIQ page looks like within the application. It's pretty simple. The student's going to click on the number that they chose to answer. They'll click that answer button, and then they will copy and paste directly into the application. Again, Google Docs is your best friend. Do not write in the application. Write it, get it perfect, get it edited, and then copy it into the UC application. Additional comments. So I touched on the academic additional comments where you could maybe talk about not getting a class you wanted or outside coursework or something like that. Here's another area where students can explain circumstances or experiences that really don't appear anywhere else in the application. Occasionally, I'll have students who have had really kind of traumatic things happen in their life, but they don't want to spend a PIQ writing about it, but they feel like their application would be kind of inauthentic without mentioning it. So sometimes a student will say, you know, sadly, in freshman year, a family member passed away and it really impacted me XYZ, and just kind of stated as more factual rather than having it be like a big kind of more vulnerable story. If you want to go that route and use a PIQ to further explain that, of course you can, but you can use additional comments for something like that. You could also use additional comments. You know, sometimes I'll have students who are really talented artists. They're not going to be applying, but they want to just, as an art major, but they want to say like, hey, in my free time, I love to paint. And here's kind of the mediums that I use, and my the last piece of artwork that I created was titled this, and it was really fun to make. And you know, just like sky is the limit with this, but I would probably try to think of something thoughtful to say in this, assuming that after all 4 PIQs and the activities section, there is something in addition. And if not, that's fine. You will not get docked for not using this, but just know that this is an additional 550 words that applicants have. Here's a picture of UC Santa Cruz among those beautiful redwood trees. And then here is the review and submit. So it's a pretty simple, you'll know if you can or can't submit it. You have all the check marks or you don't. And then you can go through that process to actually submit it. Each UC campus is $70 for the application. Like I mentioned before, there is a way for you to get a fee waiver. And you can click just directly within the application to do that, which is so nice. Back in the day when I worked for high schools, it was like a form and the counselor had to give the student the form and then they put the code in. So this is a big upgrade. But yeah, it's $70 per campus. And then here's UC Davis, just nice little student community center. And then you'll get a submission confirmation. So that is kind of a wrap in terms of the specific application specifics. And then you'll see the application status. Once a student has applied, they will receive information to be to set up their portals. UCs are notorious for taking a long time to get to that portal point. So it could be anywhere from 2 weeks to about a month. As long as you have from that previous slide, that screenshot that you've submitted, you should be good to go. But I would mark in your calendar, you know, a couple weeks after you submit to make sure that you do some digging in your email to set up your portals, because the portals are where applicants actually will find out whether they're admitted, denied, or waitlisted. And it's also a way to make sure that everything is actually received for your application. So definitely take the time to set up your portals. And this is a great kind of tool for anyone on the webinar. If you ever have issues with your application, you can call the UC Application Center, that 1-800 number within the US, or email the UC info. And they're pretty quick on that help desk, which is really nice. And then last but not least, if you have any questions, I wanted to make sure that I ended with my email. And then I did want to, before I do the full wrap up, I wanted to take a minute to share a little bit more about kind of the what's called like the holistic characteristics. Back when I used to read for Berkeley, I imagine they have kind of a new name for them now. But there is a kind of list of criteria that the UC will look at when they're looking at applicants that I thought would be helpful for me to cover. So let me just access that list here and get you guys a little bit more insight on that bit. So one second here. Okay, so the UC has kind of 13 criteria that all campuses are looking for. So There's GPA in all completed A to G courses. We talked about that in the presentation, but that's one of those criteria. There's the number of, content of, and performance in academic courses beyond the minimum A to G requirements. The third criteria is the number of and performance in UC approved honors, AP, International Baccalaureate, higher level, and transferable college courses. The fourth would be if you are designated as one of those ELC, or eligibility in the local context, the top 9% of your high school. The fifth is the quality of your senior year program as measured by, excuse me, the type and number of academic courses in progress or planned. The sixth would be the quality of your academic performance relative to the educational opportunities available in your high school. So that's that context piece. The seventh would be outstanding performance in one or more specific subject areas. So a student who has taken every single history honors class available to them, they've possibly gone above and beyond and taken a college level history class, they've maybe done a research paper related to a period of time in history that really fascinates them. So kind of that proven track record of work that is related to a specific subject area. Also outstanding work in one or more special projects in any academic field of study, kind of similar to the subject area one. Number 9 would be recent marked improvement in academic performance as demonstrated by academic GPA and the quality of coursework completed or in progress. So kind of showing that upward trend and showing that you are in fact improving is looked on really favorably. Number 10 would be special talents, achievements, and awards in a particular field, such as visual and performing arts, communication, or athletic endeavors, special skills, such as demonstrated written and oral proficiency in other languages, special interests, such as intensive study and exploration of other cultures, experiences that demonstrate unusual promise for leadership, such as significant community service or significant participation in student government, or other significant experiences or achievements that demonstrate the student's promise for contributing to the intellectual vitality of a campus. In other words, is there something on your activity list that puts you in that extraordinary category in that particular field or activity? I remember very clearly being trained to look for, like, did the applicant rise to the top? Did they rise in that particular criteria that we're evaluating? Number 11 would be completion of special projects undertaken in the context of your high school curriculum or in conjunction with special school events, projects, or programs. So things that a student might have done specifically to impact and improve their school community. Number 12 would be academic accomplishments in light of life experiences and special circumstances, including but not limited to disabilities, low family income, first generation to attend college, the need to work, disadvantaged social educational environment, difficult personal and family situations or circumstances, refugee status or veteran status. And then last but not least, the location of your secondary school and residence. A last thing that I will leave you with that I think is helpful to understand is UC is also looking for evidence of a student's self-awareness, especially in regards to their own context, privilege, ethnicity, race, experience within their world, and awareness of how they impact their own school community and what they hope to do with that awareness on a UC campus. So just wanted to kind of share and end with that. I can see that I have a couple of questions, so I'll go through those and then wrap up with any last questions that you're welcome to put into the chat. So I had a question that says, do you add summer schools like UC Scout as a high school in part of the coursework info? The answer is yes. So UC Scout you would put as a high school, and then you would go ahead and put it into, summer after 10th grade and enter in the grades earned and the level of the course the same way you would as if it were a traditional class taken at your high school. Okay, next question. For activities, how do you break down hours per week, weeks per year, if it's something like an on-call volunteer where you can serve 24 to 48 hours at a time, several times a month? Oh, okay. For that particular one, I would make sure to explain that point in the description of the activity. And then I would truly be honest and put the hours per week in terms of just an average. So if on a 48-hour shift, they're typically actually working maybe 10 of those hours, then, and they're doing one of those shifts per week, then it would be 10 hours for however many weeks a year they do that. But definitely explain the context of like, hey, I'm on call for 2 days straight, because you want to give yourself credit for that. Okay, next question is it true that applications are so competitive for UCs that you have to have a low shot if your GPA isn't over a 4.0? So the answer is yes and no. Typically students who I see from my own context and caseload of students who are admitted have over a 4.0. That being said, that last little bit that I just shared about the 13 criteria hopefully shows you that students, it's not all about GPA, and it really isn't. So students are really evaluated in that context. So it is absolutely possible for a student with maybe say a 3.7 GPA to be admitted to a UC Santa Cruz or a UCLA or a UC Berkeley. Campuses, the tricky part about UC admission is honestly just the sheer volume of applications versus space available. I think UCLA received something like 150,000 applications last cycle. That's an insane amount of applications for not a lot of spots. And so it does come down to, of course, like higher GPA and test scores are always a strong driver in admission criteria, but you can see that there's also a lot more. So putting your best foot forward. If you are a California resident, I absolutely like apply to the UC system, shoot your shot, you pay taxes towards it. And I think it's worthwhile. And UCs really do a thoughtful job of evaluating applicants if the applicant does a thoughtful job filling out the application. Let's see, last question. Is it true that if you didn't take AP or honors courses that you have a low chance of getting into a UC? Not necessarily. Again, it's that same thing where it's a combination of factors. If AP or honors courses weren't available to you, that will not hurt you. You're evaluated within the context of what is offered to you. The more competitive UCs are going to expect to see if AP or honors courses were an option at your high school. They're going to want to see that you've taken those and you've taken advantage of the educational opportunities given to you. If those aren't offered, there's no way for them to really hold that against you. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me see if there's any other questions. So the 13 criteria can actually be just found on the UC website. So do some digging there and look for the UC kind of 13 criteria that are used to review. And then if you can't find that, feel free to email me. It's Carrie@esmprep.com. That's CARRIE at esmprep.com. Okay, I think we are just about at time. Thank you so much for attending. Best of luck to all applicants this cycle. And hopefully you learned something valuable today. This should be available on demand, eventually disseminated out to our newsletter alias group too. So be on the lookout for the recording if you'd like that. And of course, email me with any future questions. Take care.